AP Computer Science A, Unit 4, P4G. So hopefully you've tried this already and tried to, watch my other video to make a working version of it, which also might help you kind of start to think about even how to do things that you've been asked to do. So this is more like, okay, you've tried it and you're getting stuck. You've tried what you can. Now, so these are messages, and log message breaks it into machine ID, which is before the colon, and then description is after the colon. And so in your constructor, that's what you need to do. So I think I already gave you guys some advice. I would create a variable to hold the position of the colon. Okay, so I would say something like it's give me int, and you might call it something very user friendly, index of colon equals. And so how do you find the location of the colon? Well, there's some string methods. So message is right here. That's what you've been given. Dot index of is a method in the string class. And then you put quotations, a colon in there. And so this will find the first instance of it. They said there's only one. It'll find the first one, and it'll give you a number for its location. So now you have that stored, and now you can use substring. So you can say, okay, well, machine ID is going to be everything before the colon. So that's going to equal message dot substring, and it's gonna start at the beginning of the word 0, and then it's going to go to index of colon. Now it's not supposed to include the colon, but the way substring works is it goes up until the spot right before this second number, so it doesn't actually keep that one. So if the colon is at, like in this first one, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to return 6 for the index of the colon. And then you're going to say, I want 0 to 6, but it really only takes 0 to 5. That's just the way substring works. And so then you're going to do something similar for description. So description equals and message dot substring. Now you can use the 2 argument substring method, or this one's easier. You just want after the colon and the whole rest of the word. So you want to start right at the spot right after the colon, index of colon plus 1, and then you could do message dot length plus 1, but if you just do one argument, it just takes the whole rest of the word. So that's your constructor. Now the next part is maybe one of the harder parts, I think, on this one. It says so we wrote the constructor, and then this one says write the log message method contains word, which returns true if the description in the log properly contains a keyword and returns false otherwise. Description properly contains a keyword if all three of the following conditions are true. The keyword is a substring. It's got to be there. Okay. And it's either at the beginning of the description, or it is immediately preceded by space. So if it's not at the beginning, it's in there, right? It's at the beginning, don't have to worry about it. And then it has to have a space before it if it's not at the beginning. Or it's at the end, or it's immediately followed by space. Now, if you're still not sure, they've given some really good examples here. The following table shows examples. The description on the left table properly contain keyword. Description on the right do not. So it could just be the whole word, which is kind of nice that they gave you that idea. It could be at the end, but it has to have a space before it. could be at the end, it has to have a space before it. It could be in the middle, it has to have a space before and after it. It could be at the beginning with a bunch of other stuff with a space after it. So you got to keep that in mind as another option. These ones don't. Can't change the capitalizations of the letter. This one's here and it has a space before, but it would have to have a space after or be at the end of the word. This one's at the end of the word, but it doesn't have a space before it. This one's at the beginning of the word, but it doesn't have a space right after it, unless it's the whole word. So the one that's the whole word is at the beginning and the end at the same time. So that matches both of these things are true. And then it's at the beginning. If it's at the beginning but not the end, then it has to have a space after it. If it's at the end and not at the beginning, then it has to have space before it. So all three of these things have to be true. One thing, one part of them has to be true. So this gives you some good examples of what to look for. We really want to break it down into there's a few different scenarios here that we're looking at happening. Okay, so these properly contain, so you want to return true if it's these, false if it's these ones. So our structure for this method is really just going to be a big if else, because there's just a bunch of different cases and you want to kind of narrow it down. We could start with the most simplest case, easy to identify. If it is exactly the word, right, return true. So this is pseudocode. I'm just writing it down logically. I'm not putting all the syntax and things like that in it yet. So if it is exactly the word, then we should return else. If what's one of the other cases? If it's at the beginning. Okay, now remember we've already eliminated. If we're getting to here, it's not just exactly the word anymore. So if it's at the beginning, we know it's not at the end anymore. But so it has to have a space right after it, right? So that's this example that I wrote up here. If that's true, then return true, right? Else, if what's another one? It's at the end. It's at the end with a space before it. Because you can say, oh, but this one it's at the end and the beginning at the same time. No, but we've already ruled that out. So if it's at the beginning and at the same time, we already caught it. Now, if it's at the beginning, it better have a space after it. Now, if it's at the end, it better have a space before it. If that's the case, then we return true, right? Else, if there's another good case, right? What's another good case? It's in the middle somewhere, not at the beginning or end, and it has a space before and after it. If it's in the middle with space before and after it. Okay, that's good. Return true. Now, I think we've identified all the different possible good scenarios. It's the whole word. It's at the beginning with space after it. It's at the end with space before it. It's in the middle with space before and after it. Isn't that every good possibility? So the only thing left is it's not in the word properly. And so we return false. So this is my structure. This is my logic. Okay, now I got to figure out the syntax. My strong recommendation is that you should be using substring. Now, or no, maybe not. No, not substring. Index of. Dot equals index of. Now, I tried to do this way more complicated the first time I did it. I was like, okay, let's, I tried to do the word, the keyword, and the spaces kind of separately. But the cool thing is the slickest way of doing this is to do it with the spaces as part of it. Okay, instead of saying, okay, we found the word, now let's see if there's a space after it. Let's look for the space with the word let's look for the word with the space after it all as one string. That's a lot easier. Now the first one, now I would pause this video and see if you can come up with this first. Okay, I'm about to put the code next. If you can't do that you're going to have a hard time in this next test. So, I mean, this was a huge help for you. This is a huge help for you. Okay, just the logic. Now, the syntax. Can you figure out the syntax yourself? So, if it's exactly the word, I'm going to say description dot equals. We don't use equal equals with objects, including strings. Keyword, right? Return true. So that's the exact word. It is totally equal to it. Okay. Else if. So I want to say if it's at the beginning with a space. So what I want to say is description. I'm going to use index of dot index of, and I'm going to say let's look for keyword with a space after it all together. Okay. Now, if it's at the beginning, index of should give me 0 for the location. Okay. And we use equal equals here because it's primitive. Index of returns an int. Okay. So this would identify that it's at the beginning and has a space after it all nicely together. So we're going to return true here. Else if. Okay. Is it at the end? Well, let's do description of dot index of description dot index of. Now here we want the space in front of keyword. So let's look for anywhere where space is before keyword, but we're specifically trying to find the end. So where would this be? What would the location of this be if it was at the end of the word? And you can look back at some of these examples. Like here's 2 good ones. So this was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We want it to be at 8. So how do we get 8 from this? So we got to think, well, we got to take the length of the word, which is actually 13, right? Subtract length of the whole message, subtract, sorry, not the message, the length of the whole description, length of the description, right? So length of the description, right? And we want to backtrack. We want to kind of try and get back here, minus probably the keyword, the length of the keyword, right? So we're at 13 and we want to get to 8. So we're at 13. We subtract the length of the keyword, which is 4. That brings us to 9, but now we got to subtract one more to get that space. So we could say length of the keyword plus 1 in parentheses, right? Because that's the length of the string we're looking for. That's exactly where it should be. So you want to kind of think that through before you write the syntax. Like, okay, how do we kind of just get that number? So it's going to be, I don't have enough room right here. It's going to be the description dot length, right? Minus the keyword dot length plus 1 for the space, right? So that should give us the right spot. So we want to make sure, is the space and keyword, is it at the very end? This would be the spot. This would be the last spot it could be, at the very end. And if that's true, we say return true. So I think that one's a little harder to like totally get right. Okay. I think that's the hardest one to get the details right on. Now, is it in the middle somewhere? Okay. So that's going to be else if description dot index of, and we want a space before it, and we want a space after it, right? And do we know exactly where that would be for those examples? Well, it's not going to be at the beginning. I mean, because it's just not even possible. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Now, the only thing, if this shows up anywhere, if this is anywhere, I think we're good. But we just don't know exactly where it's at. So can we say equal equals and we know the exact spot? No, it could be in a lot of different spots. So the best thing is to say not equals -1, because then that would eliminate, if it equals -1, that means it was nowhere. And it could happen multiple times too, by the way, and be okay. And this is just going to give you the first spot. So we just want to make sure it's not equal to -1. Because if it's anything else, that means it's there somewhere. And we say, okay, well, let's return true, right? And now we're at the last possibility, else, return false, because it's just not there, right? So that's the details of it. I hope you figured out some of it. Okay, now let's see the next part C. Part C isn't as, I think part B was the hardest part. So part C says, okay, now we have this other class called system log, and it's going to have an array list of these log message objects. And your job is to create a method that removes the messages that have that keyword properly, but add them to this other new array list and return that when you're done. But also you should be taking them out of this private instance variable message list. You got to take them out. So, we're going to totally take advantage of the method we just wrote, because that does a lot of the hard work for us. And so, and I think we need to create an array list to hold the ones that we're taking out of. And then we also need to probably have a for loop to kind of go through them. So public, it's going to return a list of log message. So you got to look at the header. It gives you a lot of, emphasizes a lot of things. The method is called remove messages, and it takes one argument, a string, the keyword, which is the thing that we were just talking about. Okay, so sort of like our rough approach is, let's create array list to hold removed log messages, right? And then we want to do some kind of for loop or something to go through the whole array list, right? And in here, we want to do some like if, and we want to call contains word, the method we just wrote. And if call contains word, and if it equals true, then we want to remove it. Okay, but we probably should also put it into the new array list first, right? So we want to put it in the new array list, then remove it, right? Else, we don't need an else, because if it's not true, it's false. We just leave it in there. We don't do anything. So we do that. We keep going. We go through the whole thing. And then when we're done, we want to return this new array list. Make sure you return it. So this is our strategy. I mean, this is the logic of it, okay? And this is a good thing to always do, just to kind of write things down in more basic, simple terms. Don't worry about all the details yet, because that can just get you really confused as you're trying to figure out the details and the big picture. This is the big picture. This is what we're trying to do. So what would the code look like for that? Well, we want to create we're going to say list, because they're using that same thing, log message. It's going to hold log messages, and we could call it, removed messages. Seems like a good name. right? And we need to initialize it. So new array list. So this is the reference is of more broader type, and then the actual object is a more specific type, array list. And it's going to hold log message objects. So we created that. Now, I think we probably need to do a for loop. I don't think a for each should work with this. I think we've discussed that enough to know that for each loops, we can't remove things from the array list when we do that. So we have to use this. So, our basic for loop int index equals 0. Index is less than. Now, not remove messages. It's message list is the private instance variable in this class that holds these. Message list dot size. And then we're going to do index plus plus. Okay. And then we're going to have an if. We're going to say if, and whatever the current log, so we're going to say message list dot get index. So that gets the current log message object, and we want to run the contains word method that we just wrote, but we got to give it a keyword, and they're giving us that keyword. So we're going to put that keyword in here, right? And so this is going to return true or false. If it properly contains it, it's going to return true. So I could say, now, by the way, because this returns true or false, I don't have to say equals true. I mean, that works, but I could just leave that off and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to return true or false, right? So checking if true equals true, it's a little redundant, but I mean, you can put it there. So if it's there, okay, first thing we want to do is add it to the removed messages array list that we just created. Dot add message list. We got to pull it out. Dot get index. We got to pull it out of there, right? So we add it there first, and then we remove it. So how do we remove something from an array list? Well, we got to put the name of it, message list dot remove, and we're going to put the index. That'll remove the spot there. Now here's something you got to watch out for, is that you guys remember the issue. If you remove something, I think we need to do index minus minus, right? Don't we have to do index minus minus? I think we have to do index minus minus, because otherwise, if there's two in a row that are good, we're going to miss it. We're going to skip it. I think the first time I did this many years ago, I was really frustrated, and that might have been my thing. Now, after you've gone through the whole thing, you want to make sure you return this new array list, removed messages. And in our driver, we create a new array list to accept these, and then we could print it out. But then we also probably want to print out the message list, the private instance variable in the system log class, and confirm that they actually got deleted, and that we got them all, right? So that's the detailed code for that. I hope you tried the syntax on your own after getting the logic given to you. But these are some pretty, I think, we could see a lot of different problems that use this kind of, logic, totally unrelated, but, looking for something, taking it out, putting it somewhere else, going through using strings and trying to figure out, what are the good conditions for something to happen or not happen. So there you go.